All right, I've had a few people comment on here. Well, I better do this. Had a few people comment on here that don't know how I set this thing up. I really didn't want to spend too much daggone money lifting it all the way up. I don't like the way the 6-inch suspension lifts look. They put way too much space inside the fender wells there. Them are 35 1250s. I have a 10-inch wide wheel. Couldn't tell you the offset. I've owned them wheels since '05. I pulled them off an old Tacoma that I used to have. But I'm also running 1.5-inch spacers behind it, so they poke out, they clean out well. That's pretty key with this thing. You got to get them stickies outside there so they can sling mud way up. It's a little bit heavier than the Tacoma is. But to make these big old jokers fit and turn and not rub, because obviously I use mine. It's kind of hard to tell right now because it's kind of wet, but this thing's got scratches all over it and dings and every daggum thing else. But to make them work, it's definitely possible. All I did was just put the spacer kit on the front. This thing, if y'all have one, y'all know it was pointed to the ground all the way up front. So whenever you do that, you're leveled out. I didn't do crap to the back. Just left it alone, and it picked it up just a touch higher in the front. Not bad. It's got a good point of approach to it. She goes damn near anywhere. But how we did the body mount to make it clear all this, and you can see all this too. See, I've completely gutted the fender wells in here. So we can flex this thing all the way out and not touch anything in here. So you see, I kept my stock fender flares because the bushwhackers I couldn't do this with. I took my Metabo. I need it to focus. And I cut it all the way to this. Let's see. That lip right there. I took my Metabo and ran it all the way down because y'all know it had a little flange that stuck out and it caught mud and everything else, and it caught my tires. Big old knobs would grab it. So we got rid of all that. First thing we did, I took my body mount here and I went to cutting it because this thing came way out here, and I cut it as much as I could. I mean, every bit of it. That's your body mount washer in there. So after I cut it off, it was so much of it cut off, I needed some more support back on it. So I took some 2.5-inch flat bar, just regular carbon steel. I bent it in a radius and I welded it back out on this side, top, down the side there. Painted it all up so it wouldn't rust. Then I went to, playing with it, trying to see if we were rubbing anywhere else, and obviously it was hitting the firewall back in here. This pinch weld, it would get it. So if you're planning on running big ass tires like these, you're going to want to flatten that pinch weld completely out. You're going to want to do like I did and start turning your wheels and seeing where they're going to rub at, which is going to be in here and some up in here, whatnot. Especially if you start taking it off road, you'll see where it rubs at. You make a few marks on it, pull the wheels back off, and get the sledgehammer out. I completely reshaped these fenders so we will not touch anything when we go off-road in this thing. I hope that did decent about explaining it. If you do try to weld this thing up here, keep in mind that's rubber. So what I did to weld it is I packed up inside it with wet rags. I wrapped wet rags all around the top, and I kept a squirt bottle full of water beside me. So I weld a little bit and I'd pull it off and start wetting it down so it wouldn't melt on my rubber. But also, I guess I forgot to mention, I put a 1-inch body lift in here as well. It's hard to see. It's sitting up in there. It sits on top. It's just 1 inch. I didn't want any more than that, and really, as much as we've done, we can't go any more than that because our brake lines are stretched to the max right now. Now, I probably will end up changing those out because my shocks are getting pretty wore out. So whenever we do, I'm probably just gonna get rid of that spacer and go with a little bit longer shock and put it up so it'll ride a little better. When I first put these big tires on here, first thing I found out is it felt squirrely on the road. So a little research, I bought new upper A arms. That made a huge difference, But at the time I didn't have the spacers inside the wheels there. It was still sucked in just a little bit. And if you know anything about riding high, you know the higher you go, the center of gravity's off. It makes it more tippy. So you want to go wider. Whenever I put those spacers on, this thing sure enough hugs the road. I'm gonna let go of the wheel in the middle of a turn and it'll keep on rolling right on around. Back fenders, I did the same way as the front. They're cut all the way through. I mean, and whenever we flex this thing out, my tire literally just barely misses it, but it misses it. I don't know how, but it damn sure does. And we had to do a little beating on it back here and all. So keep in mind, if you do any beating on it with a sledgehammer, that coating that's on it, it's all gonna fall off. Best thing I found to put back on it actually is that black rubber Flex Seal. Works freaking great. Put it on it. I would recommend doing the same thing down there. Cut all of that mess out, because every bit of this held mud, every bit. That's pretty much the setup so far. I'd like to put me some new lower control arms on it whenever I pick my suspension up just a touch. But like I said, I don't want it to go no higher. If I do 1 inch higher max, and that would be it. And I've even found out a cheaper way to do that. Let's see. Their spring. Instead of buying a really expensive spring to go back on the rear and all this, you could just put you a plate right up underneath it. You jack it up, get that spring out, put a 1 inch plate in there, and put the spring back in. Super cheap. Same thing like doing the front. So that would take care of the rear. You wouldn't have to worry about longer shocks and shit in the rear. I'm even considering relocating these shock brackets, moving them up, so I can just use the same size shock and give myself more clearance underneath here. These couple things here make a huge difference with this 4-liter VVTi motor. I've had a few of these motors and they're badass, well worth their money. But they're governed down by their air box. This is a K&N cold air. It's a throttle body spacer. When you pair them together, you get a lot more throttle response, a lot more power, and a few more miles to the gallon. Makes this thing sound like a crotch rocket whenever I get off in it. And I know it's a big girl, but this thing will shake it. 2-door Hemi don't have nothing on it off the line. Yellow top battery. I mean, it don't take much, just a little bit. This thing you're getting about 300 horses out of it whenever you do that, maybe a little touch more, depending on how old your motor is. Mine's getting some age on it, so we're gonna have to go through it here pretty soon. But you can't ask for nothing more. This big thing, looking just like it has traveled across the whole country 8 times round trip and took me straight to the woods when I got back. Straight to the mud hole. That's a daddy wagon, fellas.